The Kirinyaga governor Anne Waiguru has shown signs of dumping William Ruto and his UDA party and maybe might join DCP party as Irungu Kang'ata. This is after attacking publicly the Health Cabinet Secretary Aden Duale and asking him to apologize over the remarks he made following the Olkalau parliamentary by-election, accusing him of promoting an ethnic narrative that risks undermining national unity as Kenya moves closer to 2027 general election. In a statement posted on her X account on Friday, July 24, 2026, Waiguru described the cabinet secretary's remarks as deeply regrettable, arguing that it was both inaccurate and also dangerous to rescue or rather to reduce the government's recent political challenges to ethnic prejudice. And according to the governor, it was wrong to suggest that tribal considerations were responsible for the outcome of the Olkalau parliamentary by-election, particularly because the same Kikuyu community had overwhelmingly supported President William Ruto and the Kenya Kwanza coalition during previous elections. Waiguru said that such remarks oversimplify complex political realities and also risk damaging national cohesion at a time when political temperatures are already beginning to rise ahead of the next general election. The Kirinyaga governor also directed her message personally to Cabinet Secretary Aden Duale and saying that his extensive political experience should have guided him to exercise greater caution in his public statements. And she maintained that leaders occupying senior public offices carry responsibility to promote unity rather than deepen divisions, especially when discussing election outcomes that have attracted national attention. For that reason, Waiguru argued that an apology was not merely appropriate but necessary, saying it was owned by all Kenyans. The governor further appealed to the political leaders across the country to embrace responsible leadership as campaigns and political realignments gradually intensify before the 2027 elections. She stressed that Kenya belongs to every community, including the Kikuyu community, and warned the careless political rhetoric that the potential to undermine the country's unity if left unchecked. Her remarks have immediately attracted attention because they come from one of the President William Ruto's most prominent allies in the Mount Kenya region. Throughout President Ruto's administration, Anne Waiguru has remained a key political figure within the United Democratic Alliance and has consistently defended the government's agenda. Her public criticism of a senior cabinet secretary therefore represents a notable moment within Kenya Kwanza, particularly because it concerns an issue as sensitive as ethnicity and national cohesion, and it has come during the time when there is a particular alignment or the realignment of the leaders in Mount Kenya, where some of them have really decided to join DCP party. The controversy follows the closely watched Olkalau parliamentary by-election, which delivered a significant political setback to the ruling Kenya Kwanza coalition. In that context, the Democracy for Citizens Party, commonly known as DCP, defeated the United Democratic Alliance candidate in a race that quickly became one of the country's most closely followed electoral contests. Political observers viewed the outcome as important because Olkalau is located within the Mount Kenya region, an area that has traditionally played a decisive role in determining a national election outcome. The by-election also carried added political significance because it was the first major electoral contest in the region since the political fallout between President William Ruto and the former Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua. And as a result, leaders from across the political divide invested considerable attention and also resources in the campaign, viewing the race as an early indication of changing political sentiments within one of the Kenya's most influential voting blocs. And during the campaign period, Anne Waiguru herself actively campaigned. She repeatedly urged residents of Olkalau to keep the constituency within the government by electing the ruling party's candidate, arguing that doing so would help guarantee continued access to national government development programs and also ongoing public projects. Despite these efforts, the DCP candidate emerged victorious, creating fresh debate about the political direction of the Mount Kenya region and raising new questions about Kenya Kwanza support within the area. And following the defeat, Cabinet Secretary Aden Duale sought to dismiss suggestions that the by-election represented a referendum on President William Ruto's administration. Speaking during a public event in Lefi, Mandela County, Duale argued that the Kalau contest was essentially a battle between DCP and Jubilee rather than a direct contest involving the Kenya Kwanza coalition. He maintained that the ruling coalition remained firmly on course as it prepared for the 2027 general election and rejected attempts to interpret the by-election as broader verdict on the government's popularity. However, remarks attributed to the Health Cabinet Secretary concerning voting patterns and the role of the ethnicity in the election quickly generated criticism from several political leaders. The critics argued that introducing ethnic explanation into political debate risks inflaming divisions at a time when the country requires greater national unity. Waiguru has now become one of the most senior government-allied leaders to publicly distance herself from those remarks, and her intervention has added a new dimension to the conversation because it demonstrates the concern over the language of used after the by-election extends beyond opposition politicians. The debate has continued to grow in recent days, with attention shifting beyond the election result itself to the broader issue of political messaging as Kenya prepares for another highly competitive electoral cycle. The Kalau by-election has therefore become much more than a contest of a single parliamentary seat. Instead, it has evolved into a wider discussion about political alliances, voter sentiment, campaign strategy, and the language leaders choose when explaining electoral outcomes. The campaign itself was marked by several incidents that attracted national concern, and according to reports from the campaign period, there were allegations of voter intimidation, violence, and also attacks on journalists covering the election. Those incidents prompted investigations by security agencies, while also renewing calls from the various leaders for peaceful elections and respect for democratic processes. The political significance in the Kalau contest has continued long after the votes were counted. Its outcome has triggered broader debate over Kenya Kwanza's political standing within the Mount Kenya region and what the result could mean as political parties begin positioning themselves for the 2027 presidential race. Government leaders have generally sought to downplay the importance of the defeat, maintaining that one of the elections should not be interpreted as a definitive measure of national political support. From their perspective, local elections are influenced by multiple factors and cannot automatically be treated as indicators of the outcome of the future generation election. Opposition leaders, however, have offered a different interpretation. They have described the Kalau result as evidence that political dynamics may be shifting within one of Kenya's most influential voting blocs. And while those differing interpretations remain part of the country's wider political debate, the by-election has undeniably intensified discussion about the evolving political landscape in the Mount Kenya region. Against that backdrop, Waiguru's appeal for restraint carries added advantage. And rather than focusing solely on the electoral outcome, her statement shifts attention to the importance of responsible political communication. Her message emphasizes that leaders should avoid statements capable of creating ethnic divisions, particularly during periods of heightened political competition. That is all for today from Kenya Lens Media, where we bring you news updates as they break. Kindly, if you are new here, consider subscribing.